So Joe Schoen got extended. We don't know the details of the contract, but he got a contract extension. I'm gonna talk about that and Malik Nabers. Some news about his injury came out, and John Harbaugh spoke on where he believes Malik is at in the rehab process, and I'm gonna talk about at the end, just briefly, some expectations for CC Maui Noah and Arvell Reese. So, Joe Schoen got extended. We don't know how long. It was reported multi-year extension. Could mean 2 years, could mean 3 plus. We don't know, but like he said, it doesn't really matter. You can be fired at any time. So we just know that he's going to be here past this year. And so my initial thoughts when this first came out is it didn't surprise me. I expected this when he wasn't fired with Dayball. You know, they were kind of a duo. They were a tandem. They came over from Buffalo, and they were pretty much linked together. So when Dayball was fired and Schoen wasn't, I didn't know we were gonna get John Harbaugh, but I expected that ownership obviously believed in what Schoen did, and they didn't think that his process was just horrible and that he was the sole reason to blame. They put majority on the blame on Dable, obviously. So the reason I expected this after, I don't know if I expected it, but it wasn't a surprise. After Harbaugh got hired, is because Schoen was part of the reason Harbaugh came. It was Jackson Dart. It was some of the young talent we have on this team. And a top 5 pick, but Schoen went to dinner with him, and he was the reason he closed the deal as well. Obviously, if you have this idiotic GM that you don't believe in or you don't think, is intelligent at all, and you're meeting with him, you're not gonna agree to be the Giants coach unless you just fire him on the spot. But John Mara had Joe Schoen go close the deal and go talk to John Harbaugh. So obviously John Harbaugh gets along with him. He thinks that Schoen has something to add. And leading into my next point, well, actually, I'll get to this later, but these whole since January when Harbaugh was fired to now, Schoen's extension, all of that, John Harbaugh was basically testing Schoen on his process and how he evaluated things, how he thinks through things, how he grades players. He wanted to see the draft. It was a test. I mean, I don't know this. You're right. I'm just saying this. I'm just saying what I think. He was testing Schoen and probably reporting to ownership, hey, I like what this guy does, or I don't like what this guy does. Because ownership is most likely saying, all right, John, here are the keys. We want you to help rebuild our franchise. We're in the mud. We need you to bring us out. But first, we need you to tell you if you want to bring in your own GM or you want to keep the guy that we have. And he likes Joe Schoen. He obviously sees something in him as a man and as a GM. Because John Harbaugh is all about, morals and values and loving football. He sees that in Joe Schoen. And, we're really just going to have to trust him because as Giants fans, we know he doesn't have the best track record. This will lead into most of Schoen's reputation is just the 2025 draft class. 2024 was not great. It's not great. It's just Malik. And, Tyler Nubin is not good. Theo Johnson, I guess. But a lot of his reputation is just that 2025 draft class. Abdul Carter, Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterboo. Bang, bang, bang. 3 potential stars. So that's carrying his legacy. And Jackson Dart was a Brian Daboll pick for what we know, but Schoen was the one that traded up to get to him. So, but yeah, I don't think, so this is what I was going to talk about. A lot of people are saying Schoen is just, dick riding Harbaugh and just agreeing with everything that he says, and which is why he got the job, which is why he got an extension. I don't agree with that. I think Harbaugh is very, intentional with everything that he does. And he knows that he needs other brains around him to make this whole thing go. It can't just be him and everyone around him saying, yes, that's correct. Like John Harbaugh says, this is the guy, yep, Harbaugh, you're right. No, he needs people challenging his ideas, not all the time. Harbaugh's going to be correct a lot, but just, bringing different perspectives to the table and just bouncing off ideas. That's how the best teams are made. Like the Rams, when you have Les Snead and Sean McVay just bouncing ideas off each other, it's bound to be successful, right? So I think Schoen is, we don't know him, based on his press conferences. He's not the most well-spoken guy. He seems kind of nervous, but Harbaugh clearly thinks that he is providing something insightful and a perspective that the Giants really need, and he wants him around. So, again, I say this a lot. Who am I to not believe John Harbaugh? Who am I to say, no, you're giving Schoen an extension? Why are you doing that? He doesn't know what he's doing. No, who am I to say that? And who are we as Giants fans to say we know better? You know what I'm saying? So, I think the 2025 draft is definitely carrying, but for good reason. If you can hit a star in 3 stars in one draft, potential stars, that's not going to happen every year. So if you do that once, yeah, you're probably going to be a pretty good GM. Like the 2023 draft is just horrible. 2022, you have 2 first-round picks. You miss on both. Even if Kayvon gets an extension, which I don't think he will, he's not a top 5, worth a top 5 pick at this point, right? He's not that player. So Schoen missed on that, but looking at his trades, just Waller and Burns, I like both of them. Like, I haven't really given my opinion on this situation or spoke about him in any of my videos because honestly, I like Schoen, and that's not the popular opinion. I think that this is going to be, I don't think I've heard anyone say this. I think the best of Schoen is yet to come. I think Joe Schoen can really just have his best drafts and his best free agency signings and his best trades to come, because I think Brian Daboll was holding this man back. I think, coincidentally enough, Brian Daboll was kind of like big broing and egoing him and probably having more influence on the decision Schoen made, and Schoen was probably running it by him a lot more. And, kind of Brian Daboll was kind of making all the decisions. I'm not going to say none of them were Schoen's fault, they're all Brian Daboll's fault. But I don't think they were as good of a duo, like their chemistry was as good as we think. And I think with John Harbaugh, I think he's going to give him a little more freedom to make his own decisions. And of course you're going to mess up. But when you're not on such a tight leash, like I think Brian Daboll had this man on a leash. I think John Harbaugh's going to loosen that leash a little bit. And obviously he's still going to run shit. He's the experience. He's the Hall of Famer. But I think Schoen can just be a little freer with his decisions, and I think that's going to help him. I've honestly, 2023 draft, there's literally nothing. We're not re-signing any of those players except maybe Kayvon. That was such a horrible draft. Or that was 22. I'm talking about like Deonte Banks and them. We're not re-signing any of those players. So that's definitely tanking his reputation. But 2025 is bringing it right up. So I do think the best of Schoen is to come. I'm not mad at this decision, but the scenario I will pose is, what happens if the Giants do not meet expectations this year and they win less than 7 games? I'm kind of expecting to win 8 or more. Like, that's where my expectations are at. I'm not. If we win less than 7, I'm going to be very, very disappointed. But in my mind, I don't think that will happen. If that happens, I'll be very let down and I will be heartbroken. But that's not a scenario in my mind. But let's just talk about it. If it does happen, Schoen is probably the one to blame, right? He's the only, not the only, but he's the main piece of this losing disease of the past Giants, pre-John Harbaugh era, that's left. So I'm assuming he does go if we do happen to win less than 7 games. It just wouldn't make sense to me, though. You don't give this guy a contract extension, and then you win 6 games, and you're like, he's gone. But, John Mara, he's not been super impatient, but I'm assuming someone has to be blamed. Someone's got to take the fall. Let's talk about Malik Nabers. So, a few weeks ago, it was reported he got a second surgery, and now we just heard a second surgery to remove some scar tissue, and now we just heard John Harbaugh talk about it, and, he just said it's a complicated issue. We hope to see him sometime during training camp, but it was just his tone. You really got to listen to the video. His tone, maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but his tone was just like, it didn't sound like he believed he was going to be on the field week 1. And now I'm fine with that. I don't want to rush Malik. I want him back 100% when he's on the field. I don't want any lingering issues that, sidelines him from 1 to 2 games here. No, I don't want any of that. I want him to just, if something else pops up, that's different, but I don't want anything else with this knee. I want this knee to be fully healed before he comes back. But if he's going to miss week 1, Dallas Sunday night, if you watched my video, I talked about this is setting the tone for the season. And if he's going to miss that, that is huge. We don't have our alpha wide receiver 1, which is a lot of our offense. It's a big part of our offense. So what I'm assuming is we're going to start the year, until he comes back, relying heavily on the run game, which I'm all in. We're built this thing from the run game. Brought in Pat Ricard, brought in Isaiah Likely, big body, drafted Maui Noah, so Malachi Fields, another big body. I'm fine with having to run the ball. Dallas doesn't have a bad run game now. They traded for Kenny Clark. They got the other guy, I'm forgetting his name. So they have a fine run game, but if we're going to run smash mouth football, I'm fine. But not having Malik Nabers on the field is going to significantly hurt the offense. When you have an alpha wide receiver on the field, it just opens it up so much. It opens the run game up even more. So that is scary, but it gives us a chance to see what this run game's about. Like, we're starting off the season like that, and I'm fine with that. I want to run it down the Cowboys' throat. If we set the tone first game of the season that we're a dominant run team, like Cam Scatterboo goes for over 100, Jackson Dart is over 50 rushing yards, Tyrone Tracy is over 50, we're just running the ball. We're creating so many gaps. That is going to put the league on notice, and I'm excited for that. So, and that can lead into my next thing about Francis Maui Noah expectations. It's hard to put an expectation on a guard when, it's not even their position, but he's a top 10 pick, and he's huge, and he's already getting glazed by, beat reporters on Twitter. I don't know exactly what to expect, but I just expect him to be a bully. Like, that's what I expect. I expect him to get out in the run game. I expect him to be just not let, like, when you're moving to tackle, from tackle to guard, you don't have to be as athletic, right? Which is why you don't take a guard in the top 10, and which is why he can be a tackle. You don't have to be as athletic as you do for a tackle. So I just expect him to be a brick wall, like no other way. I expect him to be a top guard immediately. Maybe he'll take a little bit to get situated, but by the end of the season, I expect him to be a top guard in this league. There's really nothing else to say. He's a confident player. He's really just completing this offensive line. When you have three good offensive linemen, Illuminor, AT, and Malino, like three actually like Pro Bowl, they're all Pro Bowl level players. Andrew Thomas is an all-pro player. That's how you know you have a decent to good offensive line. JMS and forgetting the other guy, not GBR, whatever his name is. They can be like, as long as they're just mid, we'll have a kick-ass offensive line, So I'm excited for that. Arvell Reese, already seeing reports that he's fast as fuck. We're already seeing that he's huge, he's swole, and he's not going to be wearing the green dot. He's not going to have to do any like critical thinking. We're not asking him to do nothing. We're asking him to be a QB spy. We're asking him to be a freak athlete, and that's it. And that's exactly what I want. He's going to blitz once in a while, and that's awesome. That's awesome. Just be a freak like you were at Ohio State. Don't let Jaden Daniels, don't let Jalen Hurts scramble out the pocket, and that's all we can ask. I think we haven't had a dominant linebacker group like this in who knows how long. Going from Blake Martinez and Tay Crowder to this, like, this shit is crazy. I'm so happy. So it's going to really help the run defense. I expect R.R. Reese to have a lot of tackles. I expect him to just make running backs fear going over the middle. Make wide receivers fear running slants into him. Like, when you see R.R. Reese, you don't want to run over the middle. That's what I want. So, yeah. Really excited for those two. Excited for Schoen. It might not be the popular opinion. I'm very excited for Joe Schoen. I think getting this extension, I talk about John Harbaugh putting confidence into his players. What about putting confidence into his staff? I think he can put confidence into Schoen. Loosen up that leash a little bit. Let him have a little freedom. Once we win 10 games this year, which will happen, well, the Giants fans will be off Shane's ass a little bit, They won't be on his case as much. So, excited for that. Thank you for watching.